Welcome back to part 13 of the Introduction to Insect Taxonomy. This will be mostly a discussion about the order Odonata. I did say last time that I was planning on breaking down Ephemeroptera into their families, and I am still planning on doing that, but it turns out it's a ton of reading. Ephemeroptera is not my area of expertise by any stretch of the imagination. And so I am reading a ton about identification of both the adults and the nymphs to the family level and beyond. And that also brings up another interesting point that I should have made clear last time. There are alternate higher order classifications of a lot of these orders and families. I think I talked about two suborders last time, but sometimes those suborders are demoted to infraorders or just deleted entirely. I have seen other higher order classifications of the Ephemeroptera where they have like 5 suborders, things like that. Just take everything with a grain of salt. A lot of times when new taxonomic information comes out through research, a lot of these higher order classifications become up for debate. And so we're going to try not to get involved too much in that. Sometimes we'll be using older classification systems just because it's easier to understand. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. So today we're going to talk about Odonata. At some point I will double back and do families of the Ephemeroptera once I finish reading about all of their fun identification characters. But today, if we start out how we always start out, which is reviewing what we've already covered. So up until this point, we have already talked about the entonates, which were up here. These were the Antonatha. These were the pseudo-insects. These are kind of pre-insect insectoids. They have mouths that are contained within a pouch instead of being external. They don't go through a true metamorphosis. They never have wings, things like that. And then after that, we get into the real insects. So below that are the insects. The first two groups, the Archaeonatha and the Zygentoma, these are apterous, so they never develop wings, and they are ametabolous, so they don't go through a metamorphosis. They kind of just get bigger and bigger. They go through kind of endless numbers of molts, whereas in the higher, more advanced insects, there are defined numbers of molts, and you will see that as we go through this, as we become more advanced. Below that, these are the Paleoptera, which is what we're talking about today. These are the ancient wings, the old wings. These are the first winged insects, and they have very large wings that they can't fold over body. They also are, this is where we begin to see the hemimetabolous insects, which are insects which go through a partial metamorphosis. So this whole section here are hemimetabolous. So they go through a partial metamorphosis. So basically the juveniles look like the adults, but without wings. So they slowly develop wings and some other characteristics, but they don't go through a full metamorphosis like you would think of with butterflies, where you have a larval state and then a pupation that turns into adult. Those are the holometabolous insects down here, and these are insects with true metamorphosis. So today we're going to be talking about the last of the Paleoptera, which is the Odonata. So the Odonata are the dragonflies and the damselflies. Again, they are hemimetabolous and cannot fold their wings fully over their body, like the Neoptera can. So below this line, these are called the Neoptera, and they can actually fold the wings over the body like you would see in these photos here. So now that we're talking about the dragonflies and damselflies, this is kind of the old cladogram for what we used to consider the evolution of the dragonflies and damselflies. So this is order Odonata, and there were 2 suborders, basically. You had the Zygoptera and the Anisoptera. The Zygoptera were the damselflies, and the Anisoptera were the dragonflies. And this is how I learned it. So that has changed somewhat. Somewhat recently. I couldn't tell you exactly how recently. Where this secondary or tertiary group has been added. So these are the Zygoptera are still the damselflies, and the Anisoptera are still the dragonflies. And then the Anisozygoptera are kind of this weird middle, kind of a middle group. They're very old. They're mostly extinct. There's only one family in this suborder, or in this subgroup. So the new suborder is called Epiprocta. There's only one family in this called the Epiophlebiids. And in that family, there's only one genus, Epiophlebia. And there's only two, I know there are two confirmed species. There is a pretty sure confirmed third species, and then a debatable fourth species found. They're very old. They're about 200 million years old. And most of them are known or are thought of to be extinct. It's kind of this relictual group that's been tagged on that are found in Asia. But for what we're doing, basically, we're not going to talk about that other group because there's just that one genus. So we're just going to talk about the Zygoptera and the Anisoptera, so the damselflies and the dragonflies. So, what are the characteristics of the Odonata? So if we look at this, now let's do red, orange, yeah. What are the characteristics of the dragonflies and the damselflies? How can you tell them apart from other insects? And then how can you tell them apart from each other? So, like I've said before, they are heavy metabolists, and they can't fully fold their wings over their body. And this is very obvious with dragonflies because they just kind of stick their wings out to the side. They can't really fold them. But their wings are very large, very membranous. They're completely membranous, unlike something like a beetle or a grasshopper. And they also have tons and tons of little veins. Tons of cross veins. So you have the main veins that run horizontal, and all these are the named veins. And then in between here, you have all of the cross veins. Generally, as you advance in the evolution of insects, you actually get fewer veins in the wings as a general trend. Also, the wings they have the forewings, so they have the full set. They have the forewings and the hind wings, and they're roughly the same size. They're not identically shaped, but they're about the same size. They have enormous eyes, and this is a key characteristic. Both dragonflies and damselflies have absolutely enormous eyes and tiny little thread-like antennae. So these little things, these cetaceous antennae, what look like little hairs coming off here, those are actually the antennae. And the reason that they have such small antennae and such large eyes is that, unlike many other insects, they are visual predators. So they don't need to smell their prey or detect them that way. Everything that they do is visual. And as such, if you were to dissect out their brain, the visual cortex of their brain is absolutely enormous. And as a complement to these enormous eyes that take up pretty much the entire head, and are generally touching right in the middle. If we had a better picture here, you would see that they have 3 ocelli, which are tiny little single-lensed eyes that help with flight by being able to see above them. As a reminder, when we talk about all of these anatomical structures, if you are confused, one, you can leave a comment asking what things are, but I also encourage you to go to other videos on my channel. I do have a very long series on morphology of insects where I explain what all the structures are and all the terminology that's used. And while you're there, like and subscribe. It helps me out quite a bit. Other things about this group, right? So they have a very distinct silhouette. They have a very long and thin abdomen, very chunky, powerful thorax, and a head that is just barely attached to the body because it has very good mobility. What else? All of them are partially aquatic. So the adults fly on land, but all of the nymphs, which used to be called naiads because they're aquatic, all of the nymphal stages of the dragonflies and damselflies are aquatic. And as such, they do have tracheal gills on their abdomen. And they have, the weirdest thing that they have is a prehensile labium, which is part of their lower jaw. The labium is the lower mouth part, the lower mouth appendage on insects, and they can shoot it out to grab prey, kind of like Alien from the Alien movies, the xenomorph. So it's a fairly distinctive body shape, especially so with the dragonflies, the wings will jut out to the side. With the damselflies, the wings will jut out behind. So here's another dragonfly. You can see obviously the same things: giant eyes, clear membranous wings, 2 pairs, lots and lots of cross veins. They frequently have this black spot called a stigma on the wings. Very long, thin abdomen, tiny little antennae. If you zoom all the way in here, you can see the little thread sticking out of the head. That's the antenna. Chunky, powerful thorax. But if we look at the damselfly, one of the big differences is one, they have a much thinner thread-like abdomen, but they can't fold the wings over the body like the Neoptera can, but they do have an extra hinge joint, which allows them to not have to stick the wings out to the side. They still have to hold the wings vertically, but they can hold the wings vertically backwards or upwards, and that helps quite a bit with how compact they are. But both groups with these enormous wings are very good flyers. And speaking of which, they, as a group, can fly forward extremely fast, something like 100 body lengths per second, which I believe some of them can get up to 40 miles an hour, which is kind of crazy. But they can fly forward, they can fly backward, and they can hover in place, which is kind of unique for an insect, especially the backward thing. But most insects that can fly can't hover. When we think of insects that can hover, we think of bees and we think of like sphingid moths, but most insects have to be moving forward in order to fly. But not these guys. They can move forward, backward, or stay in place. What else? There are 25 extant families of these groups. So the Odonata, if we go back to the modern Odonata. So a lot of these guys are extinct, but between these plus one here, there are 25 families still in existence. So that's pretty neat, but there's a lot to learn about them because of that. So I said that they were primarily predatory, or they are predatory, but they are generalists. They'll feed on basically any insect that they can get their hands on or their mouths on. And as such, they also tend to eat while on the go. They are very good flyers. They're very bad walkers. So they use their legs primarily as stilts to land on, but to get around, they pretty much have to fly. So as they're flying, they will eat anything that they can catch in flight for the most part. And then additionally with the flight, some species are migratory. So there are some pretty famous North American and Indian species of dragonflies which can fly thousands and thousands of miles at a time. They fly from the north to the south with the weather in North America, and then in India they fly from India to I think it's Mauritius or Madagascar or southern south eastern Africa for the most part, and they do that to avoid the monsoons. So they're extremely good flyers. They can fly over open ocean for very long periods of time. Pretty impressive. So now that you've kind of seen this body shape, so again, they have very thin antenna, chunky, blocky thorax for flight. The wings stick out, tiny little antennae, giant eyes that take up almost the entire head, and sticks for legs. Let's look at some things that aren't dragonflies. This is not a dragonfly, although it looks very similar, and people not paying attention would think it is, specifically because of the wings. They have these extremely membranous, veiny wings. But some things that are wrong with it. The abdomen is very thick. This is closer to a butterfly abdomen. The antennae are all wrong. They have these enormous antennae. These are butterfly-shaped antennae where you have the club nodule on the end of the antenna. The eyes are large, but they don't take up the entire head, and they have this kind of weird fuzz all over the body. And the legs look a little bit stronger. They're not just stilts. They look like they can walk with them. This is an owl fly. This is a type of Neuroptera. They're primarily nocturnal, and they're kind of like they're called lace wings specifically because of these very veiny, lacy wings that they have. What else is not a dragonfly? This is not a dragonfly. So things that you might get confused with, they kind of look like stilt legs. That's true. And the abdomen is relatively thin and juts back, although the thorax is not nearly big enough. The eyes aren't big enough. They are bulbous bug eyes, but they should be taking up like the entire head, and they're not. The antennae are, again, long and clubbed to the side. And if you look at the wings, they have the hinge joint, but they can also, you have to use a little imagination, they can actually fold over the body, and you can kind of see that in this. The wings are folded together. This is an antlion, and some of you might be familiar with the larval stage of this. The larval stage of this is what feeds so voraciously on ants, and they dig a little sand pit, knock ants into it. This is what the adult looks like. So there's definitely some differences between these and, say, a damselfly, where you have such very clear, giant eyes, right? Tiny little antennae, blocky thorax. Wings that can't fully fold, tiny thin abdomen. So just be aware that there are things that look like dragonflies. It doesn't make it a dragonfly. And the same applies for the nymphal stages. So I had talked a little bit about this, where the nymphal stages, they're all aquatic. So this is a damselfly nymph, and they have abdominal gills. So these are the gills. And in damselflies, they have 3 leaf-like gills that stick out of the back of the abdomen, and that's how they breathe. And this up here is the prehensile labium. And this can shoot out, and it has little like claws on the front of it, and it can grab their prey, and it drags it into their mouth, a la the xenomorph in Alien. But you can see that this kind of has the body shape and the leg shape of a dragonfly or a damselfly. It just doesn't have any wings, and this is what it means to be hemimetabolous. The larva or the nymph or the naiad or whatever you want to call it, the juvenile stage, looks very, very similar to the adult stage, and it has a lot of the same feeding preferences. So although this is in the water, it's still quite predatory, and if it were on the land, it would still eat all of the same things. And then this is a dragonfly nymph, which is a little different. They have gills, but they're internal. So this end of the abdomen, this butt end, has a big hole in it that is used for respiration, and they suck water in through their rear end, and they have a gill chamber on the inside. Let me make this smaller so I can actually write. They have a gill chamber in here. So they can, and this acts as a siphon. This flow of liquid in acts as a siphon, and it actually is, they can use this as an escape. So that if they have, here's your bug, and with the siphon on the butt, if they suck water in rapidly, they can then shoot it out really rapidly and jet forward. So again, they have this prehensile labium. You can't really see it in this photo, but this is a dragonfly. And they're actually quite large as nymphs. So you can pick these up out of the water. They're very fast, but they're actually quite large. And you can again see, other than the abdomen, and the abdomen is very swollen in this guy because he is, there is a gill, this gill chamber in there. But if you use your imagination, you can see that the wings will grow quite large when the hemimetabolous metamorphosis is complete. It definitely has a predatory dragonfly-like head. Eventually these eyes will grow larger, the mouth will shrink down a little bit, the wings will get big, and you will have a dragonfly. And once they can start breathing air, not through gills, but through their tracheal system, the abdomen will narrow down. And these are compared to what we talked about last week. This is the mayfly nymph. So you can see the definite differences. You have these caudal cerci, always 3 cerci on mayflies. They have abdominal gills, but they're on the outside of the abdomen as opposed to on the end of the abdomen. They're on the sides usually. They don't have that prehensile labial jaw, so they can't feed like the dragonflies do, where they can kind of attack prey and pull it in. That's not happening with mayflies. But other than that, you can definitely see the different body structures here. So now you won't get so, if you were to collect these in the water, you won't confuse this for this guy or this guy. So much simpler. So with that, that is what I wanted to talk about with the general overview of how to identify a dragonfly or a damselfly, and then I will eventually also be doing family level ID or genus level ID with this group when I get around to it. Again, I need to read a ton of stuff on this group, but eventually it'll get done. So thanks for your time. Please like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.